Hello, I wanted to share with you today a little story about a horse I worked with. And he was an upper level dressage horse, very fancy. He used to compete internationally, all of that. And this isn't his real name, but I'm going to call him Cranny. Okay, so Cranny was big warm blood, and he had an unusual habit. Well, I shouldn't say that unusual. I've seen it in a lot of horses, especially dressage horses, where he held his legs like his hind feet were pointed out. And he wasn't born that way. That wasn't his normal conformation, but he used to do it kind of like a ballerina with their toes pointed to each side. And he did one hind leg more than the other. It was much more obvious on one side, but often both were quite a bit outward. And he had the best veterinary care. He had gone to all kinds of specialists and all kinds of things like that. And they weren't sure what was going on with him. And I was asked to work with him. And he was so interesting. First of all, he was a lovely, lovely horse. But, my intent is never, I need to fix and have him turn his legs in. Some people might do that. Like they might try different shoeing things. They might try different ways of like getting the horse to turn the legs so at a more natural angle. And I didn't do that, of course. But I started really working with him. I noticed that I wasn't surprised about this, but his hind quarter muscles were very, very tight and sore and all along his back. We had a lot of issues he had been dealing with you could tell, for quite a while. But I started working with him in a way that my first goal, if you will, was to find a place on his body where movement was possible. And not only possible, I shouldn't say just possible, where it felt easy and pleasurable, even if it was the tiniest little hint of some movement, and where he was okay with me touching, that he didn't have, because he was such a nice boy and he was kind of stoic. So he wouldn't do something really dramatic when he wasn't comfortable, but he might change his breath. He might hold his breath a little bit, breathe more shallow, or just have a different look around his eye or something like that. It was subtle, so you had to really watch for it. But I did not want to engage with him in a way that would create those kind of experiences for him. I wanted him to associate movement with ease and pleasure. It's really an important concept. You want to associate movement with ease and pleasure. So I started finding places on it, like around, just a little bit around his shoulder, around the withers, where I could do tiny, tiny movements with my fingertips. And I do them in such a way that there's a lift to the tissue, to the soft tissue. So I'm like scooping very lightly with my fingertips and creating a little bit of a lift, a little bit of a scoop of the tissue in like an arc. You could try it on your arm. It's actually quite pleasant when you know how to do it. And it creates a sense of relief. So especially if muscles have been, they're tired, they're fatigued. I mean, his whole body, was overworked in a way. And I started doing that, and he was getting more and more relaxed. And those little movements, there are little movements, and they work, by the way, they work on so many levels. I did a whole podcast episode about this. There's certain receptors called CLTMs that type of touch stimulates, and it does all kinds of wonderful things, including helping the horse be more responsive to you. In other words, want to interact with you. It's an evolutionary thing because it's actually based on how a mammal mama, any kind of mammal, would touch her offspring. So it creates that connection, helps create that connection. So, there's different chemicals that are released in the body, etc. But anyway, it also on a very other level, let's just call it, of the tissue, lifting the tissue in that way, right? You're supporting it. You're kind of taking over the work of it. That works on a different level, and it sends a signal to the nervous system that they can start to release the contractions of those muscles. Okay. The other thing is that the way I was doing it was a slow, gentle rhythm. And that rhythmic stimulus can help quiet the nervous system. So again, there's like the synergistic effect. There's so many wonderful benefits of these movements, and I call those rhythm circles. And again, I actually did a 3-part podcast series on this that I can link to in the description. So doing that started to create, like, you can think of it like ripples in a pond. Like, he started to generalize that relaxation throughout his whole system. That is really important. And the other important piece of this is he started to realize that it was possible to feel differently. He was so stuck in the habit of how he felt. This had been going on, I'm sure, for years. And despite all the therapies and, I mean, all kinds of therapies that this horse had, it didn't change him on the level of, oh, I can feel differently. It may those things may have helped him temporarily, but it didn't change his underlying sense of ease or unease. And this work did. It did, because it has a whole different intent. And this is really, really important. If you want to do this work, this is really vital that you understand this distinction. So then I started working with him in different ways through his skeleton. And I teach this in my program, Move with Your Horse. It's hard for me to just tell you the technical details of it on this little video, but the idea is you're putting very light, very delicate, like sensation of movement through the skeleton in very specific ways to encourage a certain experience for the horse, to invite the horse to have a certain experience. And there's all kinds of benefits of that. We can talk about joint receptors and, all kinds of great things happen, again, on a neurological level. But the idea is the horse starts to feel that there's different options. He doesn't have to be stuck. Remember, we're helping him feel, or she feel, that it's possible to experience life differently. So I started doing that with him. And one thing I noticed with Cranny was that I was doing these diagonal movements through his skeleton. One diagonal was much clearer than the other. And it turned out that totally was aligned with what his rider told me later. That validated that. And by helping him feel that both diagonals through his body, so from the right hind to the left shoulder, left hind to the right shoulder, both could be equally free and easy, his movement got so much easier, and he didn't feel the need to relieve soreness by pointing his toes out. So he totally changed, but the important thing is he changed on his own. Again, this is a big distinction with this work and why it's very different than other approaches. And this, again, I want to say, is based on the work of Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais, who did this with humans, and I adapted it and added some other things for the animals. It is very much that the individual you're working with, horse, dog, cat, whoever, creates the change on their own. You provide the learning environment. And again, I go into the details of this in my program because it's too much to go into here. But the animal makes the change on their own. It's never anything forced. It's only something suggested. But you also have to help facilitate that transformation. And there's ways of doing that. So go check out those 3 podcasts that I did about the rhythm circles and all that, because that can get you started. But the idea I want you to remember, a few ideas, is that you're helping the horse, feel differently. And so that they realize they have new options. They have different possibilities, available to them. And that you're creating a sense of ease and pleasure, and that can generalize throughout the whole system. And so you're not looking for a specific outcome. You're letting the horse dictate the outcome. So it's never anything forced. You're not making something happen, right? The horse dictates the outcome. And very importantly, you're associating a sense of movement with ease and pleasure. Also, at the same time, you're building this incredible bond with your horse, and you're clarifying or refining your communication between you two by getting into this shared awareness where you're both interested in the movement. It's such a wonderful feeling. And, I talk about, like, what you're doing basically is you're creating a harmonious movement experience with your horse. And that then translates to under saddle work as well. So you do this on the ground, but you can then start to transfer these learnings to the saddle and to other things you do with your horse. So it's pretty cool. So I wanted to share that with you. I hope you found that helpful. Go ahead and check out my website, marydebono.com. Make sure you're on my list. I do have a wait list for my horse program. And if you go to, and the reason it's important to join the wait list, or you might want to, is you're not obligated to join just by being on the wait list. And also you're eligible for any free classes I do, because I tend to do free classes before my next cohort. So if you go to marydebono.com/join horse, it's one word, lowercase, marydebono.com/join horse. You can sign up for the wait list, no obligation, and you'll be eligible for free classes that I give. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and I look forward to connecting with you again. Bye for now.